You picture it every time the news gets loud. A flash in the sky, then silence. Your truck rolls to a stop on the shoulder, dead. The dashboard goes black. Every car around you stops at the exact same second. And here is the part nobody tells you. The thing that just killed your engine was smaller than a deck of cards. And the thing that could have saved it cost about $7. I am going to show you exactly what that part is, where it hides in your vehicle, and how a family in Ohio with no electricity at all figured out the protection trick decades before the Pentagon studied it. Because the Amish never depended on the grid, they accidentally solved a problem the rest of us are only now afraid of. Stay with me, because near the end I am going to hand you a storage method pulled straight out of a government report from 2004 and an old Lancaster County dairy barn. It costs almost nothing, and it works whether you own a brand new pickup or a car you have had parked in the driveway since 1979. The first time I understood any of this, I was standing in a machine shop outside Millersburg, Ohio, watching an Amish man named Amos rebuild a diesel engine by lantern light. I asked him what he would do if the power ever went out for good. He wiped his hands on a rag, looked at me like I had asked a very strange question, and said, "The power has always been out for us." That sentence rattled around in my head for a week, because I had spent 50 years the other way, paying the electric company, trusting that the pump would push gas, that the truck would start, that the lights would come on. I never once asked what all of it depended on. Amos did not have to ask. He already knew. So let me back up and tell you what an EMP actually is, in plain words, without the doomsday music. Because the truth is stranger and more useful than the movies make it. An electromagnetic pulse is a sudden, massive surge of energy that rolls through the air in a fraction of a second. It does not burn your house down. It does not knock you off your feet. What it does is far quieter and far worse. It slips into every piece of wire and metal you own and induces a spike of voltage inside it. Anything with a tiny, delicate microchip gets that spike shoved through it like a fire hose blasting into a coffee straw. The chip does not survive. Now here is the first thing that will surprise you. This is not science fiction. It has already happened, and we have the date. The 9th of July 1962, the United States detonated a nuclear device codenamed Starfish Prime about 250 miles above the Pacific Ocean over Johnston Atoll. That is nearly 900 miles from Hawaii. 900 miles. And yet in Honolulu, streetlights suddenly went dark, circuit breakers tripped, telephone equipment failed. A burglar alarm system started screaming for no reason, all of it from a blast most people in Hawaii never even saw. Nobody had planned for that. The scientists expected some effect. They did not expect it to reach across the ocean and knock out streetlights in a city that far away. That was the moment a few very serious people in the government started quietly asking a question. If a single high-altitude blast could do that in 1962, when almost nothing had a microchip in it, what would it do to a country where everything has a microchip in it? But to really understand what you are up against, you have to go back even further. Back before electricity was in a single American home. September of 1859. A British astronomer named Richard Carrington was sketching the sun through his telescope when he saw a blinding white flash erupt across its surface. What he was watching was the largest solar storm in recorded history. Within hours, the energy from that flare slammed into the earth. And the only electrical network that existed at the time, the telegraph, went haywire. Operators reported sparks jumping off their equipment. Some got shocked. Some machines kept sending messages even after the operators unplugged the batteries, running on nothing but the charge in the air itself. Think about what that means. In 1859, we had exactly one primitive electrical system on the whole planet, and the sun reached down and lit it up like a Christmas tree. Today, you are surrounded by thousands of little electrical systems. In your walls, in your pocket, in your truck, under the hood of every car in your driveway. And that is where the story turns, because here is what almost nobody realizes about the vehicle sitting outside your window right now. For decades, people assumed a big pulse would instantly turn every car in America into a paperweight. That was the accepted wisdom. Everybody repeated it. But in 2004, the United States Congress had a formal commission study this exact question, and what they actually found does not match the movies at all. That commission, the one set up to study the threat of electromagnetic pulse to the United States, did something no Hollywood writer ever bothered to do. They took real cars into a laboratory and hit them with a simulated pulse to see what would happen. Not one or two cars, dozens of them. Running engines and engines that were switched off. And they cranked the field strength up higher and higher to find the breaking point. Here's what they discovered. Most of the cars just kept running. Some of the ones that were exposed at the highest levels sputtered, stalled, and threw warning lights. But a huge share of those simply needed to be turned off and restarted, and then they drove away fine. Only a small number suffered damage that actually stopped them cold. Now you might think that is good news, and in a way it is, but read it again, slower. The cars that died did not die because the whole engine melted. They died because one small electronic brain inside them got scrambled, one part. And when that one part quits, the 2-ton machine around it becomes useless. The gas is still good, the pistons are fine, the tires hold air. But it will not run because its little computer heart stopped beating. That little computer heart is what we are talking about today. And this is exactly the thing Amos understood in his bones without ever reading a government report. Because think about what an Amish diesel engine is. It has no spark plugs, it has no ignition computer telling it when to fire. A diesel does not need a spark at all. It runs on pure compression. Squeeze the air hard enough and the fuel lights itself. It is a machine built entirely out of metal, pressure, and timing, with almost nothing electronic in the whole path that keeps it running. You could set off a pulse next to a well-tuned old diesel and it would just keep chugging, because there is barely anything in it for a pulse to kill. The Amish did not build it that way to survive an EMP. They built it that way because they never wanted to depend on anything they could not fix by hand, in the dark, with the tools already hanging on the wall. And that stubbornness, that refusal to hand their independence over to a fragile little chip, is the exact thing that would carry them through the day the rest of us dread. So the question becomes very simple. If the danger is one small electronic part, and the Amish solution is to avoid depending on that part, what do you and I do when our vehicles are already full of them? And this is where I need you to lean in, because the answer is where that $7 figure finally comes from. In most vehicles built with a distributor, especially the ones from before the mid-1990s, there is a component called the ignition control module. In a lot of those engines, it is a flat little unit, sometimes tucked right inside or beside the distributor, sometimes bolted to the fender. Its whole job is to tell the ignition when to fire the spark. It is packed with exactly the kind of delicate electronics a pulse loves to destroy. And it is one of the single most vulnerable, most likely to fry parts in the entire vehicle. Here is the beautiful part. For a great many older engines, that module is not expensive. Depending on the vehicle, a replacement can run anywhere from about $7 on the low end up to $30 or $40. It is small enough to hold in the palm of your hand. And if you have a spare one that survives the pulse, you can pop the dead one out and drop the good one in, often in less time than it takes to change a tire. That is the $7 part, not a magic gadget. Not something you buy from a late-night ad. A humble little ignition module, the beating heart that Detroit made cheap and made fragile, sitting protected on a shelf, waiting for the day the one in your engine gives up. But owning the spare is only half of it. Because if you just toss that spare module in your glove box, the same pulse that kills the one in your engine will kill the one in your glove box at the exact same instant. You would be protecting nothing. You have to shield it. And shielding it is where a man named Michael Faraday walks into the story. Back in 1836, long before cars, long before radios, Michael Faraday proved something that still protects electronics to this very day. He built an enclosure covered in metal foil, climbed inside it, and had powerful electrical charges blasted at the outside. Inside, nothing happened. The metal shell caught the energy and carried it around the outside of the enclosure, leaving the space inside completely calm. We still call it a Faraday cage. And it is the entire secret to keeping that little module alive. The principle is almost insultingly simple. A sealed metal container, all the way around, with the sensitive item inside it not touching the metal walls. The energy travels around the metal skin and never reaches what is inside. That is it. That is the whole trick that billion-dollar military hardware is built around, a continuous metal shell. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building a bunker from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you and specifically for the vehicle already parked in your driveway. You do not need a contractor, you do not need permits, you do not need to touch a single wire in your walls. Everything I am about to describe you can do this weekend with things you either already own or can pick up for a few dollars. This is not new construction advice. This is for the home and the truck you have right now, tonight. Start with the vehicle itself. If you own something older, a truck or a car built before the mid-1980s, especially one with a carburetor and a simple distributor, you are already holding a treasure and you probably do not know it. Those engines have so little electronic dependency that the 2004 testing suggests they are among the most likely to shrug a pulse off entirely. That rusty old farm truck behind the barn that you have been meaning to sell, that might be the most valuable vehicle you own on the worst day of your life. Do not sell it. Get it running. And if all you have is a modern vehicle, do not despair, because the spare part strategy still works. You find out which small electronic modules your specific engine depends on to run. The ignition control module, the main engine computer. On many vehicles, a spare of the critical one is cheaper than you think. You buy it while times are calm and prices are low. And then you protect it the way Faraday taught us and the way, as you will see in a minute, the Amish were already doing without ever knowing his name. Now here is where I have to be honest with you, neighbor, because I promised you the buried version of this knowledge, and a single spare module is just the first taste of it. Everything I just handed you, the ignition module, the Faraday principle, the old diesel logic, is one room in a much bigger house of knowledge. I spent months sitting at Amish kitchen tables writing down the rest of it, room by room, how they keep a cellar at a steady temperature with no electricity, how they cool a house in July with nothing but airflow and shade, how they store a year of food without a freezer, how they keep pests out without a single chemical. I gathered all of it into something called the Complete Amish Home System, and there is a special limited time offer on it running right now, linked in the description with a QR code you can scan on the screen. Consider this video the doorway, and that the rest of the rooms, the whole buried archive that the modern world quietly talked you out of needing. Now let me get back to that little module and the thing that actually keeps it alive, because this is where the story stops being about wires and starts being about people. The problem with the fancy Faraday products people try to sell you is that they are often flimsy, overpriced, and honestly not much better than what you can build yourself. And the problem with building it yourself is that most folks get one detail wrong and ruin the whole thing without ever knowing. They put the electronic items straight against the bare metal of the container, and when metal touches metal like that, the energy can bridge right across and reach the item anyway. The whole thing fails, and you would never find out until the day you needed it, which is the worst possible day to learn a lesson. So the item inside has to be wrapped, insulated, padded away from the metal walls with cloth or cardboard or foam so it floats in the middle of that metal shell without touching it anywhere. The metal has to be continuous and it has to be closed, lid and all, with no big gaps. Get those two things right, the item off the walls and the shell fully closed, and you have built something the military would recognize. And this is the exact moment I remembered what I had seen in Amos's spring house, and understood it was not junk at all. Because sitting in the corner of nearly every old Amish and old farm property in this country is a piece of equipment that happens to be a nearly perfect Faraday cage, and almost every one of us has walked right past it 100 times without a second thought. The old galvanized steel milk can, the tall metal one with the tight-fitting lid that farmers used to haul milk to the creamery before the dairy trucks took over. Think about what that milk can actually is. It is a seamless shell of galvanized steel, closed all the way around, with a heavy lid that seats down snug over the top. It is exactly the shape and exactly the material of a Faraday cage. Farmers were not thinking about electromagnetic pulses when they built those cans 100 years ago. They were thinking about keeping milk clean and cold and sealed on a bumpy wagon ride. But function does not care about intention. That milk can does not know it was made for dairy. All it knows is that it is a continuous metal shell, and a continuous metal shell shields whatever is inside. So here is the whole thing put together, the piece I promised you at the very start, and I want you to see how the government report and the Amish barn arrive at the exact same answer from two completely different directions. The 2004 study told us the enemy is one small scrambled electronic module. Michael Faraday, back in 1836, told us how to protect a small electronic thing from a surge. And the Amish, without reading either one, kept a perfect Faraday cage sitting in the spring house because it used to hold milk. You take your $7 spare ignition module, you wrap it in a couple of layers of cloth or bubble wrap so it does not touch bare metal anywhere. You set it down inside an old galvanized milk can, or an old-fashioned steel bread box, or a heavy steel toolbox that closes tight. You seat the lid down firmly, all the way around, no gaps. And then you set that can in the back of a closet and forget about it. That is it. That is the whole secret. For the price of a fast food lunch and one afternoon of your time, you now have a shielded spare heart for your engine that will very likely survive the day the one under the hood does not. While your neighbors stand in the road staring at 2 tons of dead metal, you are on your back in the driveway swapping a palm-sized part, and 20 minutes later your engine turns over and catches. And if you want to make it even better, and this is the detail I almost never hear anyone mention, you wrap that milk can lid seam with a couple of turns of aluminum tape, the kind you can buy for a few dollars at any hardware store. The heating and cooling folks use it on ductwork. That tape closes the tiny gap where the lid meets the can with a continuous metal bridge, and it turns a good shield into a great one. Faraday would have nodded. Amos just grinned when I showed him, because to him, it was obvious. Of course you close the gap. You would not haul milk in a can that leaks, so why would you trust electronics to one? Now let me tell you why this knowledge nearly disappeared, and why you had to stumble onto a video at 10 o'clock at night to hear it at all, because this is the part that made my blood run a little hot when I finally put it together. For most of the 20th century, the entire direction of the American automobile went one way, toward more electronics, more computers, more chips, more sealed black boxes that you are not allowed to open and cannot fix in your own garage. Every year the machines got smarter and you got more helpless. And nobody ever sat you down and explained the trade you were making. You were trading independence for convenience, one microchip at a time, and the bill for that trade only ever comes due on the worst possible day. Somebody benefited from that. Somebody always does. When your truck can only be fixed by a dealership with a diagnostic computer, you are no longer the owner of that truck in any way that matters. You are a renter who happens to hold the title. You cannot fix it, you cannot understand it, and in a real emergency you cannot save it, because the very thing that makes it modern is the thing that makes it fragile. The Amish looked at that whole bargain and said no, not out of fear, and not because they saw an EMP coming. They said no because 150 years ago they made a decision as a community that they would never hand the beating heart of their daily life over to a system they could not repair with their own hands. Everybody laughed at them for it, called them backward, stuck in the past, and now here we are, and it turns out the people who were laughed at are the ones holding the most resilient set of tools in the country. That is what real self-reliance looks like. It is not a bunker full of gadgets. It is the quiet confidence of a man who knows that whatever breaks, he can fix it, because he never let anything into his life that he could not fix. The milk can in the spring house is just a symbol of a much bigger idea. Keep it simple enough to repair, keep it independent enough to trust, and keep a spare of anything that, if it failed, would leave you stranded. So let me leave you with the picture I cannot get out of my own head, the one that changed how I look at that old truck behind my barn. It is not the flash in the sky, it is the morning after. It is a quiet street full of expensive, modern, dead vehicles, and their owners standing beside them with no idea what went wrong or what to do. And then there is one engine somewhere down the block that coughs, catches, and rumbles to life because one stubborn old man kept a $7 part wrapped in a rag inside a milk can, the way a machinist named Amos taught him by lantern light outside Millersburg, Ohio. That could be your engine. That is the whole point of everything I just showed you. They made you believe you were helpless. You were never helpless. You just misplaced the instructions, and tonight you got a page of them back. If you are the kind of person who believes that real, practical knowledge has been quietly pushed aside so that somebody else could keep you dependent and keep you paying, then you already know what to do next, and you already feel it in your gut. Now, I want to hear from you, and I mean this specifically. Go down to the comments right now and tell me one thing. Do you still have an old vehicle, a truck, a car, a tractor, something from before all the computers took over, sitting somewhere on your property? Tell me what it is, the year and the make, because I promise you the other folks reading these comments want to know how many of these survivors are still out there. Do not just think it, type it. This audience is too quiet, and the quiet ones are exactly the people who need to be talking to each other. And if you want to keep recovering the things that were taken from you, one piece at a time, then subscribe and stand with the rest of us who are digging this knowledge back up out of the ground where it was buried. This is not about a channel. It is about a movement of people who refuse to be helpless. Because next time, I am going to show you the one item in the average Amish kitchen that keeps food from spoiling for months with no refrigerator and no electricity at all. And I will tell you the exact reason the modern refrigerator was designed to make you forget it ever existed. You are going to want to be here for that one.